Welcome. I'm the Parliament Raven. Welcome. Pull up a seat, pour yourself a cup of tea. My name's Jason Rodriguez, and I'm the Parliament Raven. Today's episode is called Hell Bent. Why am I calling it Hell Bent? Well, it's about hell, so it's a good title. We're going to look at quite a few things, and hopefully as you enjoy the discussion with me, we get some clarity on this crisis that sometimes people have about hell and the belief of being a Christian and a loving God, and how sometimes it seems that a loving God could be a bit vengeful or a mega punisher. People have called it God many things to me because of the whole concept and idea of hell. But I'm going to start with this. I'm going to start with what I believe, which is I do believe there is hell. Now, what type of hell? What kind of hell? We're going to go over that. As for me, the jury's still out, right? There's hell, but I don't know what kind it is. And we're going to start at something basic between metaphorical and literal. But I want to start with some literal quotations, right? Let's hear some of the greats talk about hell. And of course, I have Dante, and his is into eternal darkness, into the fire, and into the ice, right? Because that's where we're about to go, into the fire and into the ice. And hell can be either or, fire or ice, right? If we're speaking metaphorically, right? The punishment or the repercussions or consequences of being faithless or being lawless in the sense. The Bible calls it lawlessness, which is a turning of faithfulness, a turning away from the precepts and concepts that rule the universe, that flow from and through the Creator himself, herself, themselves, right? God is what we need them to be. If you watch The Shack, you get a great imagery of that, right? Both masculine and feminine, all in one. God is all. So let's move on to hell, right? So definitely something that shakes the foundations and preconceived notions of messages from what I talked about when I was talking about I was in Vegas and talking about the street preachers preaching a turning of hell and fire and flame. And the reason I want to start with metaphorical or literal is because if it's a literal place, if it's a literal place of fire and frenzy, then we have a literal representation in the word. Jesus talks literally about heaven and hell multiple times, right? And get these images of fire and we get these images of darkness. And I'll definitely bring those verses to life, or at least bring them up as we discuss hell, right? This place of separateness, of the lack of all goodness that exists in the universe. So if it's metaphorical, though, we have a bigger problem, right? You don't escape the literal. If it's metaphorical, that means when Jesus is using darkness or fire, or the Bible is using darkness or fire, that means it's something that how did I write this down? It's a reality we never experienced, and so we're using words to try to relate to that negativity, that place that is just horrendous, and all we have is words. Because since we've never experienced, it's beyond a scope of experience, and so we're using words that we can experience, which means it could be even worse. This could be even worse. I mean, these are images as bad like fire. If I'm a native Californian, and when we have fire, it is smoke, it is flame, the night sky is lit orange, and it rains down white ash, and it's pretty bad, right? And darkness, a lot of people don't like the complete absence of light. Not just the darkness you get when you're walking around late at night at your house, and you get the outside light, or you have a night light or thing. Utter absolute darkness. Worse than these two things wrapped into one, if we're metaphorical, is this place, this Gehenna, this hell. So we'll start with that. And I'm going to go from the literal sense due to the fact that there's way more views on the literal sense, right? Because if it's metaphorical, it's metaphorical. I'm either going to relax from it, or I'm going to really come to realize, well, it's going to be pretty horrendously horrible. Now, there's an argument that there might not be a hell at all, and that I don't know. I have Jesus, right? Jesus is, as a believer, is my Lord and Savior, and he talks about it. So how do I dance? I don't know how to dance around when the person I've put my faith in, the person who I believe is God, the Son of God, and talks literally about this place and people being divided into it. I don't know how theologically you can get past that. And I know that people feel like, well, he's loving. How could a loving God? There's consequences to our actions. And a loving parent, a kid puts his hand in the fire and he's going to get burned. And a loving parent will see that and ooze and do his best or her best to wrap that bandage. But it was still the consequence. There still was a consequence for sticking your hand in that fire. Your hand was burned. There's still a consequence for not accepting the gift. Ultimately, that's given for free, right? The good news of the kingdom is that we have a free gift of eternal life and joy and peace and harmony once we shed this mortal coil. Let's move on. I keep saying start, but we've already started. So, who is God and his justice, right? So we know that God's character is love, but we also know that he's justice, and and if he's just and there is laws already set into place, then he won't break his own laws. He will do everything to create a bridge, right? And that's the whole reason Jesus came, was to circumvent the justice found in the law set forth in creation to deal with things that are not in his personality or character. You surely die. Those things shrivel and disappear in front of his very presence. And he definitely doesn't want that. Jesus says that none should perish. That the Father's will is that none, not a single one, would perish. But there's also that concept of free will. We have our ability to make a choice, just like a criminal has the ability to steal or not to steal. We have the choice whether to accept the gift of eternity through Jesus or not. So we move forward. There's three views, right? We have three views of hell. We have the classic view that the wicked will be thrown into a pit or the outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth and pain forever. And that's called the classic or the traditional view. And plenty of people believe in the traditional view. And some people find comfort in it. Throw Hitler into the pit of fire forever for all the things he did. Stalin, I mean, you can go through some of the most horrible people in that we've known through our times. And I bet even go farther back, we have plenty of more horrible and horrors within our world history that we could say, man, throw that guy in there and that. But that ultimate justice is always in the hands of the Lord. And he's able to judge ultimately what is and what is not of the kingdom. And the blood of Christ paves the way to have that eradicated, which is great. Then there's the annihilationism, that the wicked will be thrown into hell and burned up, so they will no longer exist. No longer there, beyond memory, eradicated. And the atheists would love that. That is definitely something the atheists could get behind. They don't want to believe in a higher power. They want to believe when they are gone forever, forever. And that they leave just carbon back in the ground for fertilizer for a tree, worms, bugs, whatever. For fertilizer for a tree, worms, bugs, whatever. Forever gone is annihilationism. And there's plenty of people and plenty of folks who support this and write books about this. And last but not least is ultimate reconciliation. And all who are thrown into hell will be purged of evil until every single person repents and believes in Jesus, to the ultimate end that all will be saved and go to heaven. And that's that whole concept that none should perish. And it seems more like a purgatory-esque concept that the Catholic brethren believe that doctrine, that there's this purgatory. A recent book that I read by a pastor by the name of Sadhu has an example of the traditional view of hell. And it goes something like this: as we are moldable clay in this world, we are able to change our shape and our purpose, why we are here. But then the kiln of death sets that into place. And once the spirit is set into its shape and form from the mortal life, it cannot be changed. It is either a spirit destined for heaven or a spirit destined for hell. So there is definitely some imagery found throughout theology that's very thought-provoking. I want to say thought-provoking due to the fact that hell is a thought-provoking situation. For instance, I have a coworker who just can't believe in a God who would send somebody to hell. And you come to the point where you try to explain, well, it's a matter of decision. He wishes that none should perish. He gives a free gift. He wishes that none should go to hell. And of course, there's some great theologians. Paul Young, who wrote The Shack, is definitely a hopeful reconciliationist, right? He's hopefully that is the truth, that everyone would get a second shot. While one of my mentors, Dr. Harold Lieberly, is definitely an annihilationist and believes that the Lord would allow none to suffer who he loves and they would be eradicated. And I am still out. I do a lot of research on this, and I continually go back and I continually read other points of view. And the jury's out for this Parliament Raven. He sits out and he looks on the options. And I would like to sit with Paul and be an ultimate reconciliationist, but I'm also, the concept of justice is highly something I believe in. I think there is justice in the universe, and to say that there is no consequence for our actions, it would make Jesus's sacrifice impotent, right? Why sacrifice the beloved Son who was there, who all things are in and through, who came down and took on the very essence of being his creation, and died and got whipped, and the horrors that he went through to die and be resurrected for no consequence, no reason. There is no consequence. There is no hell. Well, then why is there this bridge, this gap needing to be crossed, created between man and the Creator, if that wasn't the case, right? And we're logical beings, and we have to think logically. As logical beings, we have to use the faculties given to us by the Creator, who is super logical, who's logic beyond us, and look at the things that have been given to us, people, right? And so you have this concept of a fiery place, and why is it there then? You're right. Is Jesus talking about fire in Matthew 5:22, being Gehenna, being thrown into a fiery place? And then you also have in Matthew 8:12, people being thrown into the outer darkness, this place that is outer, and this place that is separated, right? The outer darkness, right? Which means, is there an inner darkness? There's questions. Is there inner darkness? Is there an outer darkness? Why is there an inner darkness if there's an outer darkness? And if the outer darkness is so bad, how bad is that? Well, if the Lord is the God of light and the God of lights, as it says in Hebrew, if you go back into the Old Testament, then that means he's not there, right? So if we look at hell, it is the absence of heaven. It's the absence of the things that are defined in heaven: love, joy, peace, patient kindness. These things that are fruits of the Spirit that are exemplified in this holy place, in this place that is called heaven. And just like absolute zero is the absence of warmth, hell is the absolute absence of all things that are good. So it's this place where things are that are just the absence of good. And that's where, if there is no good to be found in the human spirit, well, then it needs to go to a place where there is no good to be found, which is scary in a way, right? That there's a consequence for our actions on this plane of existence, on this plane where we ourselves are living now and making decisions. But why is this place in existence in the first place? In Revelation on that, in Matthew 25, verse 41, he says, hell was prepared for the devil and his angels. Now, devil is a completely different story. There's a lot of arguments about the guy, girl, person, being, but ultimately the position of Satan is the accuser. So this accuser and his angels who also accuse, right? Because if the main guy is an accuser, then all the people below him is going to be accusing too. So these is the place of these accusers of the brethren, and they're going to be chucked there. So not a good person, and I talk about the person in the sense of being in existence, not a good person to be around, not a good person to hang out with. Definitely doesn't want to be alone though, and definitely wants to take what he considers his enemy's most beloved treasure, which is us, wants to take that with him, right? If I'm going down, I'm taking everything you love with me, is the concept behind this being who prowls like an angry lion around us. And I get that from Revelation, that the devil prowls like an angry lion. And Jesus goes as far as it says it's better to go into heaven with one hand than go to hell, go to hell with two. And I wrote it down. My version, my translation is better to lose a hand than to be thrown into the fire, bro. It is better to lose a hand, an eye, a foot, a toe, your leg, be a paraplegic than to be thrown into this place that is so far from what is good, that the darkness, that we only can describe it as darkness and in fire. And so what is the compassionary point? We have stories that we find in the Bible, the stories of Lazarus, and I'm not talking about the one who Jesus raised, but I'm talking about the one who would just want a drop of water and wants his children to be warned of this thing, and he's told that we've sent the prophets and we given words, and if you refuse to believe them, why would they believe a ghost? Why would they believe you? We sent plenty of warnings and we shot plenty of signal flares into the air and be like, over here, come, the escape is over here. And they completely ignore it. And so why continue to, if they won't hear that, if they won't hear the creator of the universe whose miracles are in history, their history. We have plenty of eyewitness accounts of them, historical, non-biblical accounts of this, and him being seen after he was dead would be the greatest miracle for everyone to hallucinate that. It's said in A Case for Christ by Lee Strobel, when he was asking a psychologist, and he said that would be the ultimate miracle, to have everybody have the same hallucination at once would be the ultimate, and so improbable that the truth is evident. We have this evidence of there being a place, right? Because if we come to the point that we have to believe what Jesus says is truth, right? And this Raven is a believer that, for me, that's the truth. Then I have to believe that when he's talking about this place of outer darkness and fire, that it exists, and that it's a consequence for not choosing life or love, not choosing life or love. And there's evidence also that can begin here, that darkness, we're not protected from that it leaks out into the world and into our minds, because sometimes heaven and hell is a battle of the heart and mind, and that's more real than our physical. The mind and the soul can affect the body, and the body can affect the mind and the soul. And we have these events where it's written, people write about it, like the night of the soul and the late hour, where it seems like we are in our own, we've created this place that lacks goodness and hope, and that we can be free of that, right? Like, we search for freedom from that. I think that's sometimes why people rather not go too deep into theology and listen to those get well messages. And I'm not going to put any pastors on blast over that, but pastors that talk about the Lord wanting you to live a healthy and happy life, which he does. Don't get me wrong, he does, but totally avoiding the consequences of not. So, hell. Where do you stand? Where do I stand? I don't know. I stand that there is a place, and we have the reference. I like to talk about that absolute zero of the not having warmth, and hell is the absolute zero of not having God and being separated. Now, is there going to be a timeline in which people are going to be there? All eternity is what I've read in the Word, It's better to be not thrown in there for all eternity, which kind of contradicts that whole annihilationism. It's better to not be thrown in that place and be reconciled. I want to, right? I want to be very hopeful, like Paul Young. I want to be very hopeful in the sense that all would be reconciled to him even after death. And then I read those theological views about the clay. And so this Parliament Raven is out on that. But I know that there is a loving God. And I know that there is hope while we're alive. And I don't know, if hope springs eternal, then hopefully there's hope even beyond the mortal coil. But it's hard to find that in the concept of consequences. Well, I hope I've brought some alleviation or started the mind rolling, the cogs turning inside your head about this concept of perdition, of hell. And I'll leave you with a quote from Milton. And it's, "The mind is its own place, and itself can make a heaven of hell and a hell of heaven." So remember to renew your mind. Please come back and visit. This Parliament Raven likes having tea with you. And thanks again. Hopefully we can bring some more clarity to some certain things. Have a great day. If you'd like to go deeper, the Parliament doesn't end here. We have a Patreon where you can access extended teachings, reflections, and tools. The conversation continues in our Discord, where seekers, creatives, and thinkers gather to discuss just about anything. And if you want gear for the journey, you'll find shirts, mugs, and more at the Parliament shop. All the links are in the description below. Thanks for walking the road with us. We'll talk again soon. Some ending music credits. Intro music by Russ Budgeon. Outro music by the Parliament Raven. Music arrangement by Sonoea. Bring your bruised hopes, feathers, not failures. Bring your fears, questions, maps, not mistakes. Bring your quiet